Sometimes in life, there comes a moment when you have to decide, stay silent and safe, or stand up and pay the price. This is the story of the day I raised my voice in a room full of silence, and everything changed. If stories like this inspire you, don't forget to like the video, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep sharing more powerful journeys like this one. Now, let's begin. The office was quiet. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't come from harmony, but from fear. A silence thick enough to be felt, like invisible smoke hanging in the air, pressing down on everyone who sat there. Rows of desks stretched across the floor. Screens glowed faintly, filled with spreadsheets, reports, emails. The sound of keyboards was steady but subdued, click, 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 never too loud, never too bold. Phones rang occasionally, but conversation stayed short, clipped, almost whispered. No one laughed. No one joked. No one dared. That was the way of our office. At the far end of the room, glass walls surrounded a corner office. Inside sat the man who ruled over all of us, the manager. His presence was heavy even when he wasn't speaking. Even when the door was shut, even when he wasn't looking, people carried the weight of his eyes on their shoulders. He wasn't the kind of leader who built people up. He was the kind who enjoyed tearing them down. In meetings, he raised his voice, cutting through the air like a blade. He mocked people for mistakes, no matter how small. He asked impossible questions and smiled when no one could answer. And when he smiled, it wasn't kindness, it was cruelty, thinly wrapped in charm. The office had learned to survive him. Survival meant lowering your head, keeping your voice soft, and never, ever drawing attention. Survival meant giving short answers, hiding your emotions, and making sure that if blame was in the air, it landed on someone else. We were a team only on paper. In reality, we were survivors, each fighting quietly for ourselves. Every morning, I watched the same scene play out. People arrived with coffee in hand, their eyes heavy, their shoulders already slumped. They sat down, adjusted their screens, and slipped into the rhythm of silence. Nobody looked around. Nobody wanted to be noticed. The walls were gray. The carpets, dull. Even the lights buzzed softly, casting a pale glow that made everything look washed out. The whole place felt drained, like a photograph that had lost its color. And yet, beneath all that stillness, there was something alive. Fear. It moved between us like an unseen current. You could feel it when someone typed too loudly, when someone sighed too heavily, when someone's phone rang one ring too long. Heads would turn, eyes would dart toward the corner office, waiting, listening, praying the door wouldn't open. Because when that door opened, silence wasn't enough. The air changed. Shoulders stiffened. People froze mid-sentence. It was like a storm entering the room. Some days, he walked across the office without a word, just surveying, just watching. That was almost worse than when he shouted. His silence wasn't like ours. His silence was loaded, purposeful, like he was waiting for the right moment to strike. And strike he did. A single mistake could trigger him. A misaligned chart in a presentation. A typo in a report. A number that didn't add up fast enough when he asked for it. The punishment was always public. He would call someone out in front of everyone, voice raised, tone sharp, and the unlucky target would shrink in their chair while the rest of us pretended not to hear, not to see, not to exist. That was the worst part. Not his anger. Not his insults. But our silence. We all hated him. We all knew what he was. But we also knew what happened to people who pushed back. Those who challenged him didn't last long. Some were fired. Others quit. A few simply disappeared one day, their desks cleared out, their names erased from the company chat like they had never been there at all. So we stayed quiet. We typed. We nodded. We obeyed. And every day, a little piece of ourselves disappeared with that silence. I remember once, sitting at my desk, staring at an email I had rewritten for the 10th time. My hands hovered over the keyboard, frozen. The words I wanted to write, the honest, simple words, felt dangerous. So I rewrote them, softer, safer, emptier. By the time I hit send, the email didn't sound like me anymore. It sounded like what I thought he wanted to hear. That was the kind of place it had become. A place where even words were filtered, reshaped, drained of truth. And as I looked around that day, I realized something frightening. No one looked alive. Not really. We were breathing. We were working. But our eyes were dull, our movements mechanical. Like machines with just enough energy to keep running, but not enough to dream, not enough to fight. That was the office. A room full of people, trapped in silence. And I was one of them. For now. It didn't happen all at once. For weeks, for months, the tension had been building. Every insult, every cutting remark, every humiliation added to the weight pressing down on all of us. We carried that weight in our hunched shoulders, in our tired eyes, in the way we avoided each other's gaze. I thought I could live with it. That's what everyone else seemed to do. Just keep your head down, finish your tasks, cash the paycheck, and go home. Endure it. Survive it. That was the rule. But rules don't hold forever. The breaking point came on an ordinary morning. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic. Just another day in the silent office. The hum of computers. The faint buzzing of lights. The air heavy with unspoken fear. He entered the room like he always did, abruptly, with the kind of presence that sucked the energy out of the air. His shoes clicked against the carpet as he walked between desks, scanning, judging, searching for weakness. His eyes found their target. It was Daniel. A quiet man, one of the most diligent people I knew. He stayed late when others had gone home. He double-checked his reports, his numbers, his presentations. He wasn't flashy, he didn't brag. He just worked. Hard. That day, his mistake was simple. A slide in his presentation wasn't aligned properly. A graph slightly off-center. Barely noticeable to anyone else. But to the manager, it was fuel. He stopped the presentation mid-sentence. His voice cut through the room. What is this? Daniel blinked, confused. Sir, it's... Look at it. The manager's voice rose, sharp, cruel. This is amateur work. Do you think our clients pay us for amateur work? Silence. No one breathed. Daniel's face flushed red, his lips trembling as he tried to speak. I can fix it right now. Fix it? The manager laughed, the kind of laugh that wasn't laughter at all, just a weapon shaped into sound. If you had any standards, it wouldn't need fixing. Do you even care about your job? Do you even care about this company? Daniel stared at the floor. His hands gripped the edge of the table. He was holding himself together by a thread, and all of us could see it. But no one spoke. No one moved. That was the way. Stay silent. Stay safe. But something inside me shifted. As I watched Daniel shrink in his chair, humiliated in front of everyone, a heat rose in my chest. My pulse quickened. My throat tightened. The old rule, stay quiet, suddenly felt unbearable. I glanced around the room. Everyone else kept their eyes down, pretending to read papers, pretending to type, pretending not to hear. But I knew they heard. I knew they felt the same as me. The fear. The anger. The shame. Why didn't anyone speak? Why didn't I speak? My heart pounded louder. My palms grew sweaty. I tried to tell myself to stay calm, to let it go, to follow the rule like everyone else. But then Daniel's voice cracked. He tried to defend himself, tried to explain, but the words wouldn't come. The manager cut him off again, voice booming, filling the room with his authority. And in that moment, something inside me broke. I couldn't stay seated. I couldn't stay silent. The chair scraped loudly against the floor as I stood. The sound sliced through the stillness like a blade. Heads turned. Fingers froze on keyboards. The room shifted, every eye moving toward me. My body trembled, but my voice found its way out. This is wrong. The words hung there, sharp, undeniable. The manager blinked, caught off guard. He tilted his head, a slow, mocking smile spreading across his face. Excuse me? I swallowed hard. My legs felt weak, but my voice was steady. You can't keep treating people like this, I said. We all see it. We all feel it. And it's wrong. The silence after that was suffocating. No one moved. No one spoke. The weight of the room pressed down on me, heavy, crushing, but I didn't sit back down. For the first time, I had stood up. And nothing would ever be the same again. The moment after I spoke felt endless. My words echoed in my own ears. My chest rose and fell, my heart slamming against my ribs like it wanted to escape. The silence in the office was heavier than it had ever been before. Every pair of eyes was on me. Every breath seemed held. Time stretched. The manager stared at me from across the room. His smile had vanished. In its place was something sharper, colder. His expression didn't show surprise for long, it shifted into something darker, like a predator deciding whether the prey in front of him was worth the kill. You think you can stand up in my office, he said slowly, each word cutting through the air. You? I could have sat down. I could have pretended I misspoke. I could have apologized, softened my voice, and gone back to the rule, stay silent. That's what everyone wanted me to do. I could feel it in their stares. Their fear wasn't just for me, it was for them, for what would happen if this escalated, if the fragile balance of our survival shattered. But I didn't sit down. My knees shook. My palms itched. My throat was dry. But I didn't sit down. You humiliate people, I said, forcing each word out like pushing against a wall. You break them down. And you expect us to call it leadership. But it's not leadership. It's cruelty. Gasps. Not loud, but sharp enough that I heard them. People shifted in their seats. A few lowered their heads as if shielding themselves from the explosion about to come. The manager's lips curled into a thin line. His eyes narrowed. Careful, he said, his voice low, almost a whisper, but the kind of whisper that carried more power than a shout. Do you know what you're risking right now? Yes, I said. My voice cracked, but I steadied it. Everything. The air in the office was electric. I could feel the tension vibrating, running through the desks, the computers, the very walls. It wasn't just me against him. It was me against the entire system we had all been trapped in. And I could see it in the faces around me. Fear. Shock. But also, just for a flicker, hope. A spark in their eyes that hadn't been there before. He leaned closer across the conference table, his voice like venom. Sit down. Now. I shook my head. Not this time. Something shifted in him then. He wasn't just angry. He was insulted. Someone had broken the unspoken rule of his kingdom. And he wasn't going to let it go. Fine, he said, his tone sharp as glass. If you want to play hero, let's see how far it gets you. He ended the meeting abruptly, his hand slamming the laptop shut with a crack that made people flinch. Back to work. All of you. Chairs scraped. Papers shuffled. The room dissolved back into forced silence. But nothing was the same. Because I had stood up. And everyone knew it. And so did he. The hours after the meeting were unbearable. The office looked the same, rows of desks, glowing screens, quiet typing, but the air was different. Heavy. Charged. My words still floated in it like smoke that wouldn't clear. No one spoke to me directly, but I could feel their eyes. Quick glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Concern. Curiosity. A kind of silent gratitude mixed with dread. They knew what I had done. They also knew what it meant. My phone buzzed once. A message from Daniel. Just 2 words, "Thank you." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then slipped the phone back into my pocket. The manager's office door stayed shut for most of the day. That was unusual. Normally, he moved across the floor, his presence constant, his authority a shadow we could never escape. But now he was silent. Waiting. Planning. And that silence was worse than his voice. By late afternoon, I got the message. Not an email, not a call. A sharp knock on my desk from his assistant. She didn't look me in the eye. "He wants to see you." The words felt like a sentence. I rose slowly, my legs heavy, my body stiff. The walk to his office felt longer than it should have. Every step echoed in my head, a drumbeat of inevitability. The door shut behind me with a soft click. He sat at his desk, perfectly calm, perfectly composed. Papers neatly stacked, pen placed exactly parallel to the edge. He looked up at me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Sit," he said. I obeyed. For a moment, there was silence. He tapped his fingers against the desk, studying me like I was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You think you're brave," he said finally. "You think standing up in front of everyone makes you some kind of hero." I didn't respond. "But let me explain something." He leaned forward, his voice soft, deliberate. "This is my company. My rules. And people who forget that," he let the words hang, unfinished. The threat didn't need to be spoken. I clenched my fists in my lap, forcing myself not to flinch. "You embarrassed me," he said, his tone colder now. "And you'll pay the price." There it was. The punishment, spoken plainly. Not if, when. I swallowed hard. Maybe. But at least I said what everyone else is afraid to say. His smile widened, but it was sharp, dangerous. "We'll see how long that courage lasts." When I left his office, the others didn't look at me. They pretended I wasn't there, as if distancing themselves would save them. But I saw it again, that flicker. A spark in their eyes. They were afraid. But they were watching. And I realized something. The price was real. But so was the change. Because once you stand up, nothing ever goes back to the way it was. The days that followed felt like walking through fire, but the flames were invisible. At first, nothing seemed different. My desk was still there. My tasks were still the same. My coworkers still typed at their screens. But beneath the surface, everything had shifted. The air carried a weight I couldn't shake. I began to notice the small things first. Meetings where my name wasn't mentioned. Projects I had led quietly reassigned. Messages left unanswered. My seat at the table slowly pushed further toward the edge. It was subtle, careful. Not loud enough to draw suspicion from outsiders, but clear enough for me to understand, I was being erased. I tried to ignore it. I told myself I could push through, that if I just kept working hard, the storm would pass. But storms don't pass when someone is feeding them. Every day, the manager's eyes lingered on me longer than before. Not angry anymore, measured, calculating. He didn't need to yell. His silence was sharper than any insult. The worst part wasn't him, though. It was them, the people around me. The same people whose eyes had flickered with hope when I stood up. The ones who whispered thanks in hallways or left me quiet notes of support. They had gone silent. Completely. No more glances. No more words. Not even half smiles. It was as if I had been cut off from the world, like an invisible wall had grown between me and everyone else. I didn't blame them. I knew why. They saw what was happening to me, and they were terrified of catching the same fire. The safest move was to let me burn alone. Still, it hurt. One night, I stayed late in the office. The floor was empty, the lights dimmed except for the soft glow of my screen. I looked across the rows of empty desks and felt the loneliness sink into me like a weight I couldn't carry anymore. I thought of my family. Of the bills stacked on my kitchen counter. Of the dreams I once had for this job, that I would grow, that I would matter, that I would be more than just another name on the payroll. And I wondered, was it worth it? Was one act of defiance worth everything I was losing? The answer didn't come easily. It gnawed at me. But deep down, even as I questioned, I knew the truth. Some things cost too much to stay silent. I stood up knowing there would be consequences. What I hadn't realized was how lonely the road would be. Still, as I sat there in the empty office, I told myself something I didn't entirely believe but needed to. Storms don't last forever. But I had no idea just how much worse this one was going to get. The blow, when it came, was quiet. No shouting. No public humiliation. Just an email. Simple. Direct. Cold. Effective immediately, your role will be restructured. Please meet with HR to discuss next steps. I read it twice, then 3 times. The words blurred on the screen. Restructured. A careful word. A polished word. A word that meant the same thing as destroyed. I sat frozen in my chair, the office spinning around me. People walked past, chatting about deadlines, weekend plans, new accounts. No one looked at me. No one acknowledged the moment my world shifted. HR's office was sterile, too bright, too clean. The woman across from me smiled politely, her voice soft, rehearsed. She explained the decision as if she were reading from a script. Organizational changes, efficiency improvements. Not a reflection of your work. But I knew. We both knew. It wasn't about efficiency. It was about punishment. My options were laid out neatly, accept a downgraded position with less pay and no influence, or separate from the company with a modest severance. Both options felt like loss. Both options carried his shadow. I thought of the years I had given this place. The nights I stayed late, the mornings I arrived early, the weekends I sacrificed. Every ounce of loyalty, poured out. And this was the return, silence and exile. Walking back to my desk, I felt like a ghost. My things, photos, books, small trinkets collected over years, suddenly looked like relics, evidence of a life already gone. By the end of the week, it was official. My badge no longer worked at the main entrance. My email shut down. My name removed from the system. I was out. The world outside the office looked the same, cars honking, people rushing, the sun setting in streaks of red, but everything in me was different. I carried an emptiness I couldn't describe, a hollow space where certainty used to live. And yet, beneath the fear, beneath the grief, there was something else. Something fragile, but real. A strange kind of peace. Because even though I had lost my job, my place, my security, I still had my voice. And no one, not even him, could take that away. But peace is not the same as healing. Nights were the hardest. Lying awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. The sound of my own voice standing up. The sharpness of his threats. The quiet knife of that HR meeting. Sometimes I wondered if I had been foolish. If silence would have been smarter. If the price I paid was too high. But then I remembered the faces. Those flickers of hope in the eyes of people too afraid to speak. And I realized, sometimes, paying the price is the only way to remind others what courage looks like. The weeks after leaving the company felt like drifting through fog. Every morning, I woke up expecting the rhythm of work, the rush to beat traffic, the buzz of office chatter, the endless meetings. But instead, there was silence. It was strange how silence could feel heavier than noise. I kept wondering if my story would end here. A forgotten name in an office that kept spinning without me. But then the messages started. At first, they were small: an email from an old colleague, a text from someone I barely knew. Quiet words, carefully chosen. "I saw what you did that day. I'll never forget it. You made me realize we don't have to accept everything. Because of you, I found the courage to look for something better." And then more came. Some from inside the company, some from people I had never met, connected through whispers that had traveled farther than I imagined. It stunned me. My one act, standing up and paying the price, had left ripples. Tiny at first, but spreading. I realized then that courage doesn't always win the moment. Sometimes, it plants seeds in the dark. Seeds that grow long after we've walked away. I was no longer in the office. My desk was empty, my name erased. But my voice lingered, echoing in ways I hadn't expected. And that was my legacy. Not promotions, not titles, not paychecks. Just the memory of one moment of truth. I had paid the price, but maybe, just maybe, it was worth it. For months, I wrestled with doubt. Finding work again was harder than I imagined. Interviews came and went. Some companies looked at my history and smiled politely, already deciding I was too outspoken. But then something happened. A small firm reached out. Not flashy, not powerful. Just a group of people trying to build something real. They had heard my story, not from me, but from someone else, and instead of running, they leaned closer. During the interview, the CEO asked me one question. If you had the chance to do it again, knowing the cost, would you still stand up? The answer came easily. Yes. For the first time in a long while, I saw approval in someone's eyes instead of fear. He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already believed. They gave me a chance. And in that small firm, surrounded by people who valued integrity over silence, I began again. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was honest. I built projects, mentored younger teammates, and this time, I didn't have to hide my voice. The scars of the past remained, but they weren't just wounds anymore. They had become reminders, proof that even broken paths can lead somewhere new. And for the first time in years, I felt the warmth of hope again. Years later, I was invited to speak at a conference. The room was filled with professionals, some young and eager, some older and weary, all searching for something more than just another paycheck. When it was my turn, I stood at the podium and looked at the crowd. My heart raced the way it had that day in the office, but this time the fear didn't own me. I told them my story. Not dressed up, not softened. The humiliation, the punishment, the loss. And then, the unexpected gift, the legacy it left behind. The room was silent as I spoke. Not the silence of fear this time, but the silence of listening. When I finished, the applause was thunderous. Not because my story was extraordinary, but because it was familiar. Afterward, people came up to me. One said, "I thought I was alone. Now I know I'm not." Another whispered, "Tomorrow, I'll stand up." And in that moment, I realized something profound. The price I had paid years ago was still echoing. Not just in my life, but in the lives of people I would never meet, in places I would never see. The echo of courage had outlived the fear that once tried to bury it. And that was the true ending, not silence, not loss, but resonance. Because sometimes, the voice that trembles in one room becomes the strength that transforms another. Time has a way of softening memories, but not erasing them. The office where I once stood up and paid the price no longer exists. The company was swallowed by a larger corporation, its name erased from glass doors and business cards, its culture scattered into fragments. But the story, our story, remained. Years had passed when I received the unexpected email. The subject line was simple: "You won't remember me, but I remember you." I almost ignored it, but curiosity pulled me in. The sender was Daniel. The quiet man who had sat at that table, red-faced and trembling under the weight of our manager's cruelty. The man whose humiliation had lit the fire that made me rise to my feet. His words stopped me cold. That day changed my life. Not immediately, but slowly. I had thought silence was survival. I thought keeping my head down was the only way. But when you stood up, I saw something I had forgotten: choice. I wasn't trapped, not forever. I left that company 2 years after you. I built something new. I wanted you to know, because of you, I found the courage to begin again. I sat staring at the screen, the room around me fading. Tears blurred the words, not from sadness, but from the weight of them. All this time, I had wondered if it mattered. If my defiance had vanished into the void. And now, years later, the circle had completed. The act that had cost me so much had carried someone else forward. The seed I had planted unknowingly had grown into something alive, something strong. It struck me then: courage is never wasted. Even when it feels like failure, even when the cost is unbearable, it lingers. In memories. In whispers. In the quiet resolve of someone watching from the sidelines. The circle wasn't just between me and Daniel. It was bigger than that. Every person who had reached out, every stranger who had found courage through the echo of my story, was part of it. Courage, it turned out, was not a single spark. It was a chain reaction, passing from one to another, multiplying quietly until it lit up entire rooms. That night, I closed my laptop and stepped outside. The world was calm. The air cool. Stars scattered across the sky. I thought back to that day in the office, the fear in my chest, the trembling in my hands, the voice that cracked when I said, "This is wrong." I had thought I was alone then. I wasn't. I had thought I was weak. I wasn't. I had thought the price was too high. But maybe the price was the proof. Courage always costs something. But what it gives in return can outlast lifetimes. As I stood under the night sky, I realized the story wasn't ending. Not here. Not with me. Because someone, somewhere, was watching. And one day, they too would stand up. And they too would pay the price. And they too would light the path for the next person. The circle would continue. And that was enough.